It was Christmas morning, and it must have been the early '80s. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was the early '80s, probably '84 or '85. Came down the steps of my row home, my brother running ahead of me, of course. He always ran ahead of me on Christmas morning. And I can remember the first thing I saw was an orange sled. That orange sled has embedded itself in my memory. But also, what I saw that Christmas morning was toys, and not just any toys, but the the holy grail of '80s Christmas toys. There was He-Man, there was G.I. Joe, and there was Transformers. This is one of the signature Christmas mornings that I can remember from my childhood, and the Transformers were a big part of it. Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Basement Podcast. My name is Mike Jamison, and I'm your host. And joining me down the basement is returning guest, Melody. Melody, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good. Glad to be here again. Hello, everyone in podcast land.
I'm glad to have you back on again. And this is our first episode. It's going to be our first of 2 or 3 holiday episodes. As we're recording this, we're right before Thanksgiving, but when this will be released will be in December. So we will be smack dab in the holiday season. And since we're going to be smack dab in the holiday season, what better thing to talk about than the Transformers? And Melody, you came to me and you were insistent. You were insistent that you wanted to talk about this. You were very, I felt a little bullied that you wanted to talk about. No, I'm only kidding. But you were insistent that you wanted to talk about Transformers. So why Transformers? Why did you want to talk about the Transformers?
Well, much like you, Mike, they loomed large in my childhood because we're kids of the '80s, and for some reason, vehicles that transformed into robots and then back to vehicles that then fought with other vehicles that transformed into robots, then back into vehicles, I found infinitely fascinating. But I am curious, which G.I. Joe set were you talking about?
Oh, I wish it was the Holy Grail. This is the second time I'm bringing the Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail of G.I. Joe collectors is the flag, the USS Flag, approximately 5 feet in length, 2.5 in width. Comes with all you see here. It's and it floats. That's the other thing.
I would love to tell you that is what was under the tree, but it wasn't. I was never lucky enough to have that playset. I never had that. I never had the Millennium Falcon for Star Wars. When I do the introductions for all the episodes, they are all true stories. I'm not making things up. And I do remember this Christmas. I do remember coming down the steps, and it was the ultimate. It was the '80s exploded underneath the Christmas tree. There was Masters of the Universe action figures. Santa Claus in our house, for some reason, he didn't wrap toys. Santa Claus did not wrap toys, which we're laughing, and I'm laughing because my wife. Now, no kids are coming down the basement right now, but both of my kids, unfortunately, do know. And if your kids are listening, shoo them into the other room, because spoiler alert, my kids know that there is no Santa Claus. But my wife, when they did think there was a Santa Claus, would wrap their gifts in special Santa Claus paper, in white paper, and she had a Santa Claus stamp that she would stamp the paper with. So those were the Santa Claus gifts. My mom, I love her, God bless her soul. We were not that fancy in Southwest Philadelphia for Christmas, so Santa Claus did not wrap gifts, which was actually good because it led to memories like this where I would run downstairs and see the gifts as soon as I ran downstairs. I saw the sled that I just talked about, and I saw the action figures that I was just talking about.
Oh my God.
So it was a bunch of action figures. I know it wasn't that huge playset, the flag that you were just talking about, because I know I never had that. I could not tell you exactly which action figures they were, but it must have been '84 or '85 because it was right at the time in the '80s when all of these toys were at their most popular, and we were lucky. You're saying that we were children of the '80s. We were, and I I'm not the first podcaster to say this, or there's media types that say this. I truly do believe that growing up in the 80s was the best time to grow up, with the movies, with the action figures, with the TV shows. We were just lucky. My kids, it went very fast with my kids, Christmas, and they never had. My son got superheroes because as he was growing up, he's 14 now, so he grew up right in the middle of the Marvel age of movies. So interest in superheroes, which was great for me because I'm a superhero person, and interest in superheroes were very big. But so we would get him superhero action figures, but now there's so many, I feel like, and I, I just feel like there was such a uniqueness to the toys that we got to play with in the 80s. And what we're going to talk about tonight, Transformers, is one of those toy lines, and one of those, I guess you can call it an IP now, because it's lasted for almost 40 years, or over 40 years. But we were right there at the basically the beginning, at the genesis of the craze that became Transformers. You were saying that you were interested in them because you thought, "Oh, it's robots that change into something else." Why Transformers? Why not GoBots?
I was into GoBots as well, but
Okay.
in the little town I lived in, they weren't as prevalent as Transformers were. It's like, because you go to Mart in their toy section, and it was like the big juggernauts, GI Joe and Transformers at the same time. So I would just like, every time mom and I would go, I just like, bye mom, and like whoosh, I'm off to that aisle, just like, just okay, well, they got this, they got this, they got this. Oh, I need that. Oh, I need that. Like a lot of men do in hardware stores now. I did back then with my toys, and it was just, I could still think back the last time going to that Mart with my mom, the last time they were like really on the shelf, because it was just like Transformers became everything. I the sheets, um, the records, the books. It was like, when R2 does this, you turn the page, and just and the cool thing about Transformers is they were bigger, because GoBots were the little guys, and so just having the Transformers was amazing, because you could not help but feel Optimus is your dad in 1984, because he was that like, not stern but fatherly, confident person who's like, we're here to get the job done, you know, and then they're just changing shape and rolling off, and the music, and the most evil Megatron, and he's just, oh, how could you not love that, to the point where you're just like, okay, that's just a part of me now.
I was joking, or half joking, when I brought up the GoBots. I feel like with all of these crazes, there's always the two things that come out, and it happens with movies also, but it happens with toy lines, where it's the two toy lines that are very similar, and there's always going to be the one toy line that comes out on top, and the other toy line that your grandmother buys you something when she's coming for a visit, and
Yeah.
she knows you like those robots, so she's going to grab whatever she sees in the five and dime store. And that's probably how I got uh, the GoBot Leader One. Was, I
He
think, the only GoBot that I owned, and somebody must have given it to me. I don't know if my grandmother gave it to me. I don't know if my parents gave it to me. That was the only GoBot that I owned. But you bring up a good point. In 1984 and 1985, it feels like if you went into a toy store, if you turned on a television, all you saw was Transformers. You saw the cartoon episodes, you saw the commercials. If you went into the toy store, for us it was Kitty City, was the toy store that we went to. And if it wasn't Star Wars toys, by 84, 85, Star Wars was starting to wane. So most likely they moved all of their Star Wars inventory to the back and just moved all of the Transformers and GI Joe inventory to the front. One of the one of the toys that stands out in my head was, and I think this was a uniquely 80s thing. I know with my kids, I didn't see this item, so I don't want to say that it's not around anymore, but I don't remember seeing it looking for toys for my kids over the last 10 to 14 years, there were tents for beds. There were these little tents that you can put over your bed, and they had superheroes, they had Care Bears, they had Pound Puppies, they had Transformers. My brother and I shared a room, and he had a Transformer tent for his bed that you would connect. I would assume, I guess it connected to the four corners of the bed. So he had this Transformers tent that he would go into every night. It was connected to his bed, and because I was such a big wuss, I still am. I did not like the dark. I used to crawl into the tent with him because I felt safer sleeping inside the tent. So every morning, my dad had to put the tent back together because the tent would be destroyed from my brother and I rolling around at night because we couldn't stay still while we were sleeping, and the tent would be destroyed. So, other than the action figures, that is the one Transformers item that will stay in my memory most likely until I'm 90, hopefully 99 years old and on my deathbed. And maybe I'll have a Transformers tent above me then, but that is one of the most popular Transformers items that I can think of. To bring it back to Christmas morning and to bring it back to the toys, I think for most of us, we were either introduced to Transformers through the cartoon that was syndicated or through the toys. Now, do you remember Transformers first from the cartoon, or do you remember the toys first?
I was actually from the cartoons. It played on KBTV 12, which is a station out of Portland, Oregon, that played it basically right as I got home from school. And so just I was primed and ready just to not deal with anything other than that right after school. So just come in the door, throw down the stuff, boom, it's on. And there's my boys, Optimus and Megatron fighting their eternal battle of good versus evil.
It's always weird to me to see that, and I think I was first introduced to them through the cartoon also. I don't This is so long ago now, through the haze of time, I can't remember, but I remember the cartoon way more than I do the toys. And for us, it was, I believe, on Channel 29, which was a Philadelphia UHF station. It's now a Fox station, so it's still around. But it was syndicated in the afternoon. It would come on either before or after G.I. Joe. So you would have, usually for us, you would have the cartoons. You would have Super Friends, Scooby Doo, G.I. Joe, and then Transformers. I remember more when G.I. Joe first premiered. They made a big thing out of the miniseries of G.I. Joe. That was the premiere of G.I. Joe. I think I went back after or saw it in reruns, the Transformers kind of miniseries that introduced the characters. And the characters, the cartoon and the toys, and then eventually the Marvel comic book, which I'm going to talk about also, there are differences in the origins and in the backstories of the Autobots and the
Oh yeah,
Decepticons.
it when you get into the minutia of it, like in the British comics, um, Jetfire, the Macross jet that they brought over in like I think '87 is actually the air quotes leader of the Autobots, and Optimus is he's convoy in Japan, but in the comics he's still Optimus, but he's like the lieutenant, where Jetfire is the commander of the Autobots.
So for you, and yeah, we're going to get into, because I have a connection with the Marvel comic, specifically the Marvel comic that guest starred Spider-Man. It's Transformers number 3. So
Yep.
I will be talking about that in a little bit also. But for you, and we keep bringing up, GI Joe, Transformers, He-Man. Out of all of the '80s toy lines that eventually became cartoons and these multimedia IPs, was Transformers always your number one? Was it always number one before G.I. Joe? Was it number one before Masters of the Universe and everything else?
Oh yeah, definitely. It has never not been number one. Uh, you know, I have I have a ton of Transformer tattoos. That's how much I'm into it. And it's just they've never waned when I got into my late teens into 20s when you want to do other things, but they were never completely gone. And then when I got older into my 30s, I'm like, oh yeah, I love these things. I'm like, oh, I have money now. Oh crap. Okay, so here we go. Start buying all the things that I didn't get a chance, and you find out, oh, that existed. Like the tent you mentioned. I'm like, oh man, that looked cool. I'm like, and you like realize that thing was probably a death trap because the polyurethane was probably the cheapest they could get with the most terrible smell.
Oh, for sure. Every morning, my dad would come in, and as a parent now, I, I understand why he was so annoyed because there are things that my kids continue to do after I tell them not to do it. So every morning, walking into our bedroom and saying, "Why did you crawl into that tent again? You guys are gonna strangle yourselves, or you're not gonna be able to breathe, and I'm gonna find you dead." This was also the '80s, so parents didn't mind telling you might find your children dead at any point of time. Um, yeah, for me, you were bringing it up. It was exciting. It was that time. Again, it was that time where it was exciting to come home from school, finish your homework, and if you weren't going outside to play, or sometimes you chose not to go outside to play because you knew GI Joe was coming on, you knew that Transformers was coming on. And I brought up Super Friends, GI Joe and Transformers specifically, they always seemed a little bit more sophisticated in animation. And I think it was a lot of people's first introduction because it was with, I think Marvel owned, and you might be able to enlighten me on this. I think Marvel had a stake, or they were distributing the cartoon, and I also think Sunbow was also
Yeah.
had a hand in it. So I would
Yeah.
think it's a lot of people's first introduction to that. It's not direct anime, but it was
No.
very different looking than your Scooby Doo's, your Super
Yeah.
Friends, and everything else.
Yeah. Because turns out Transformers the animation actually was anime because like it was Sunbow, the Japanese company. Like they didn't write it, but they're the ones who painted the cells. They're the ones who did all the taking of the pictures of the cells in order. Sometimes not in the right order. Uh, like the episode City of Steel, there's a few frames and a few seconds of animation that actually had the right wind it backwards when they recorded it because the animator had got the stack backwards, and so it's Ramjet going from I think left to right, and then when he animated, he accidentally grabbed the bottom of the stack, and so Ramjet goes backwards, and so when they filmed it, they had to rewind the film so it looks like he's going in the right direction. So
Before we get really deep into it, I want to do the simple questions such as favorite character.
oh, easy Soundwave done.
Yeah, there you go. And again, 80s. Soundwave, Megatron, just transform into guns. If you were done playing with your Transformers toys, you could always grab your Rambo, Uzi, or knife and go outside and play with that also. But yeah, Soundwave is a very cool character. Now, do you have a certain episode or storyline of the cartoon that you hold particularly higher than some of the others?
No, not really. Um, as an adult, uh, I kind of enjoy the episode called "The Ruby Mines of Burma," where they're trying to get the ruby gems to power their spaceship, and then Prime he's hit with they use roller. It was one of the few times they used roller, and he goes in there, plants the bomb, he comes back out, and they're waiting for him, and then Prime's waiting for him because roller is part of his camper, and the explosion goes off early, and so Prime's caught on it, and it was a huge cliffhanger of the episode. Like you hear, I think it was Jazz yelling Prime, and you see him rolling down off the hill, and you're just like, oh my, it's like with the old Batman series. You're like, what will Batman do to get out of this? Like, well, what will Prime do? It's like, well, then they come back and like, oh, Prime's fine. It takes him 10 seconds longer to transform back to standing, but he's okay, kids.
Well, I think that's good that you're bringing that up, though, because I think Transformers and also G.I. Joe, in a little bit of a way, they also stood out as cartoons for us as kids because they weren't always self contained to those 22 to 25 minutes. They would have continuing storylines that you would have to or could follow during the week. I say could because I don't think all of the UHF stations that were showing the cartoons always showed them in the correct order. So if you were lucky enough, you could follow the storyline, but that was different than most. You would watch a Scooby Doo and you're there for the 22 minutes of laughs and that's it. The episode's done, it's self-contained, and you're waiting for the next one tomorrow. That's going to be another mystery. But with Transformers, they would have continuing storylines.
Yeah, yeah, there were a couple big cliffhanger ones. The one I remember the most is called The Ultimate Doom. I think it ended season one of the four seasons that exist. And basically, at the end of it, the Autobots fall into a like lava trench. And the announcer says, will the Transformers survive? And we all know they did. But back then, it's like, whoa, like your buddies are going to their doom. I have to be here to see how this ends.
That was a really good impression, by the way, of the announcer who would appear sometimes in the beginning and sometimes at the end. That was very, very good.
I've heard it a lot.
Well, before we get more into the cartoons, we started the conversation talking about the toys, so I do want to talk about the toys. Now, do you have any specific memories of getting certain toys, of any Christmases where you or birthdays where you got Transformers? What are your specific toy memories of the Transformers?
I kind of get them, love those smaller guys during the year, but at Christmas, mom and dad would get me some of the bigger ones. And the one that I remember, and I still have him, I got Snarl from the Dinobots, who are like, Soundwave is at the top, but the Dinobots are like right under. It's like, we go from a 10 to a 9.5 in importance.
And they were kind of the first new characters introduced, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's because in the TV show, Wheeljax creates them because they find dinosaur bones in Mount Hillary, the mountain in Oregon, and that's another comics thing that we can get into. And in the comics, Teletran One creates them because Shockwave shows up, wondering where his fallen comrades have gone. And so the ship senses danger, and it's like, oh, I see these ancient sentinels, the dinosaurs. So it makes the Dinobots to scare off Shockwave. And so it kind of points to what you were saying, just how wild and different the comics have got over the years.
I want to get into the comics. Before we do, I am not as big of a fan, obviously, as you are, but I always had a soft spot for Blaster because I had the toy also. And we keep bringing up the 80s. It was the 80s, boom boxes. I mean, what's more 80s than a transformer that transforms into and from a boom box?
Oh, I know. He was a great toy too. He was big.
He was big. And it was always it was almost like you were getting an extra because you would get the cassette tapes that would transform also.
Yep. One of them was Rewind. The little blue guy was Rewind. I forget the other guy though.
I'm not you. If you don't know, then I'm not going to know. And as a Decepticon, Starscream, I always, I always loved Starscream. He was so deliciously cowardly, but also planning to just stab Megatron in the back, and he had the great voice.
Chris,
And he was,
yeah.
he was kind of comic relief also, and he was a plane. It was a great design. It was a very, very cool design. So Starscream, I usually didn't go for the villains unless it was Darth Vader or Boba Fett as a kid, but I always liked Starscream.
Oh yeah, I love Starscream. Well, and I'm sure you know this, Mike, that Starscream and Cobra Commander were the same voice.
Yes, 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 yes.
Like Chris Latta, the same actor, and actually in an episode of Transformers, Cobra Commander did appear. It was like season three, maybe even early four. They're dealing with an arms dealer who has a rasp, and they call him Old Snake.
Hmm.
And at the end of the episode, because he's in a kind of like the '80s signature disguise, where he's got a brown fedora and a brown trench coat for the whole episode. And then as he's walking away from the camera, you hear him try to say Cobra, and it's just like, okay, now you're trolling us. That's great.
Because and you're gonna have to tell me if I'm wrong. I'm sure they've crossed over the years in comics, and I know they're planning a crossover movie as they try to continue the Transformers. I mean, the Transformers movies now in the current times have been at least successful. The GI Joe, they're having more trouble trying to make a franchise out of GI Joe. But I'm sure, and just tell me if I'm wrong, that they crossed over in comics over the years.
I really don't think they crossed over together until like the '90s. After,
That's what I thought. I know it was later, but
yeah, I think after the original run of the Transformer comic ended, and GI Joe's as well. Um, that's when they kind of like, oh, brand synergy. Like, let's kind of put these, like, hey, you got peanut butter in my chocolate, and hey, you got chocolate in my peanut butter, kind of thing. And I those that stuff really didn't start until we were all kind of older, and they were just trying to pump that well for more water.
sure. Being a comic book nerd growing up in the 80s, I loved my continuity, so I always in my head canon thought that GI Joe and Transformers that they were in the same universe. And playing with the toys, I would have the Autobots team up with the Joes against the Decepticons and Cobra. So I don't remember that episode, but now I'm gonna look on YouTube and see if I can find it because at 10-year-old Mike would have been in continuity heaven watching that, seeing Cobra Commander. We keep bringing up the comic books, and yes, there are different. And I'm going to lean on you again and your knowledge of all of this because it's a convoluted web, and I'm bringing up web because I'm going to be bringing up Spider-Man. It's a convoluted web. It's a lot. It's a little bit like GI Joe in that when GI Joe the toys came out, they knew that they were gonna have a comic book series that they were gonna use to try to help sell the toys. So they leaned on Marvel writer Larry Hama to create backgrounds for most of the characters in the toy line. And the G.I. Joe comic is an anomaly in that the comic added such a rich backstory to all of the characters, and the comic became something so much more serious than the toy line ever was.
Oh
Now,
yeah.
Transformers, I don't think uh, is as well remembered, but there are still differences, and they did count on some of the Marvel writers to come up with backstories. The main example is the writer, and it's Denny O'Neil, who most people remember as a Batman writer. He's famous for being a Batman writer, but he switched companies between DC and Marvel every once in a while. He came up with the name Optimus Prime.
Oh, that's cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until I was researching this. But then most of the backstory that he came up with, they kind of discarded, except for him coming up with Optimus Prime. And I think they leaned on Marvel editor in chief Jim Shooter. He came up with a lot of the history that the comic used. But I'm going to stop and let you talk about it because I know there are differences in the comics and the cartoons and the toys. So, what are some of the differences?
Yeah, well, so if you think of it, so the original Transformer toys were actually a line from a Japanese company called Takara, who they licensed from Tommy. So, you see old toys they'll have on the bottom, they'll say Takara Tommy. And they were just a line of weird toys that changed that they didn't know what to do with. And so Micro Change became the Decepticons because they're the guys that was Megatron, Soundwave, the Jets. They were from the Micro Change line because they were like, they changed and they were these small items. So they were micro changed. And then the other line was all the cars. And so they became the Autobots. And they just kind of like said, well, we now have these toys, build a universe. And the writers are like, okay. And so they just are like, well, this guy's a gun, so he's obviously the leader. And he's like, what does it feel like to you? Like, there's an interview of Frank Welker where they kind of like had all the toys out on the table, and they're like, well, we got you for voice actors for this show. Kind of pick a guy that kind of piques your interest. And Walker picked up Megatron, and he's just like, he has a pretty cool toy, and he's like, he just kind of came up with a voice. He's like, oh, he looks angry, and then so he starts kind of like doing what Frank Walker does, is making this amazing voice just out of nowhere, and it's just amazing. And I'm sure you've heard Peter Collins' story of how he came up with the voice for Optimus Prime, right?
I don't, but can I guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did he base it on John Wayne?
No, not really.
Ah, okay.
So I'll be really quick because we could be here all day with me telling stories about the voice actors. But um, Peter Cullen was telling his brother, I'm going to this, this little role. It's for a toy thing, and the brother says, "Well, what is it about?" Well, I have these guys for good versus evil, and his brother says like, well, tell me about the characters. Like, well, he's a leader, and he holds the Autobots' hand and he helps them, and he says, and he tells him like, Peter, a leader has to be strong enough to be kind, and like just these, and it turns out Peter's brother had gotten back from Nam. And the reason Peter made his voice of Optimus is like that's his brother's voice. Because he said when his brother came back from Nam, he sounded different.
Hmm.
Like, and that just always struck with me. Just like it's the change of war. Like it changed his brother, so he sounds different coming over. And so Peter Cullen to kind of like honor his brother and the advice and getting like a leader is strong enough to be kind. That's how he came up with the voice of Optimus Prime.
It's pretty amazing the stories that can come out of. You think of these as just stupid toys that we played with, but then you hear a story like that, and I think it leads into a larger idea of where we were in the early 80s. In that time, it was right smack dab in the Reagan 80s. And, America was back and great shining city on the hill. And we were just starting to come to terms with you're bringing up Vietnam. We were coming to terms with Vietnam, and it was so much time had passed that I think the media now was reflecting it, but in a different way than the media reflected it in the 70s. And most of the 70s was a response to Vietnam, but that's why it was that darkness that you saw in the 70s movies and television shows and a lot of the media. But by 84, 85, it's almost like that Rambo thing, whereas now do we get to win this time? And I think these were cartoons that, and I wasn't thinking of this in 84, 85, but these were cartoons that we saw ourselves in GI Joe. We were the good guys, and we saw ourselves in the Autobots. And I obviously Transformers is based on a Japanese toy line, so it's not directly related to that. But I think that as kids, because we grew up in this time, it was also that time of you were worried about nuclear war and you were worried about the Cold War with Russia. And we saw ourselves as those ultimate good guys. You saw yourself as an Autobot or as a G.I. Joe soldier. And as you mentioned, Optimus Prime was like a daddy figure to us. And it's amazing, though, to hear that story about Peter Cullen's brother who came from something so horrible and was telling his brother, who's doing the voice of somebody who's supposed to be a leader, that you need to be kind. And it's amazing to find stories like that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it shows why we're sitting here on a podcast over 40 years later talking about this stuff, because it's
yeah,
not just, oh, I collect the toys. It's something that obviously dug deep into your psyche and helped to make you the person that you are today.
yeah, yeah. I'd love to share you a story about because you asked me what my favorite storyline of the show was, but I remember my favorite line. It was from the first story arc, More Than Meets the Eye, probably part 2 or 3. Uh, Back when the Autobots could fly before they decided to go. Well, that's kind of dumb for cars to fly.
Oh, that's right. They could. Okay. Yeah. Go on.
So, like the Decepticons have foiled the Autobots once again in trying to collect Energon from the planet Earth, and they're taking off. And Ironhide, who was voiced by Peter Cullen, which I found out years later, which blew my mind because a guy who does voices does more than one voice. That's amazing. But so he, as Ironhide, he takes off in a rage, and Skywarp does that. Skywarp was what I love him because the transporting ability he could do, were like disappear and reappear. And he disappears, comes up behind Ironhide, and shoots him out of the sky. And he flies down. Ironhide crashes in a lake, and I think it was Prowl. Well, one of them had the winch in their hand. I think it might have been Jazz. Pulls him out, and Prime goes, there's a fine line between it being a hero and being a memory.
Hmm.
And it's just that holy shit. Like just like what kind of line is that for a kid show?
Yeah.
Like a little like little boys and girls are hearing their hero Optimus say, "Be careful. There's a fine line between being a hero and being a memory." Wow.
I think that can lead us into, and you're talking about uh, something that's profound in a kid show. That can lead us into, we're going to talk about the comic, but I think it's a good segue to talk about Transformers the movie, which when you talk about when you talk about getting a little bit more adult, Transformers the movie, there was, of course, this was the mid to late 80s by that time. There was no internet, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, so you had to rely on the kid network, which meant the schoolyard or the school bus or talking to your friends outside. So when Transformers the movie came out, all kids could talk about was, "Oh my god, everybody dies and there's curses in it." So that meant I have to go see this cartoon. So I want to know, before I say anything, what are your thoughts on Transformers the movie and the songs also?
Well, I still have the vivid memory of seeing Transformers the movie at my local Cineplex. There was only three. They only had three like available screenings, like one, two, or three. I was in the far right. My dad was in the middle. He was watching Aliens, and uh, just seeing Prime die. I still remember, like there was only four kids in there during my showing, and I was like left third row, like super close because I'm just like, this is Transformers movie. This is going to be great. And then the score started by White Lion. Transformers, and I'm like,
Oh yeah.
yes. And then everybody started dying, and Wheeljack got
And,
unceremonious
and
murder.
gruesomely. I mean, just gruesomely.
God, they killed Ironhide and Ratchet, and they just brutal murder.
I want to say, and I'm sure you know this, but for the audience out there, and I'm sure anybody listening to this, they're dorks like we are, so they must know this. But for other dorks listening to this who don't know, executives wanted to basically have a new line of Transformers. So instead of just starting a new season of Transformers and having new Transformers, they came up with the brilliant idea of, let's put a movie out and we will horribly murder the old Transformers and we'll introduce new Transformers. And the kids, after they're scarred for life, will happily go out to all the toy stores and buy the new Transformers.
Yeah, hearing the stories, the studio actually wanted it worse. They like had to like constantly tell them, no, we're not murdering these. We're not like just stop. Like we'll
They were
introduce the
blood.
toy.
They were out for blood.
Yeah, it just like they because they're adults and adults sometimes don't understand that young children become emotionally attached to drawings. And
Yeah.
so when your parent figure Optimus dies, you are just scarred for life. Like if you remember that one moment, it never leaves you. Just because the music was amazing, and just the I think that it's called the Death of Optimus on the soundtrack, and so it just gets really quiet, and the piano starts playing, and Optimus first of all he dies, then he turns his head and turns gray.
Turns gray.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my, they were so brutal to children.
I I would love, and I don't know if I saw it in the theaters. I don't know if I saw it in the theaters or waited until it came out on VHS. I wish I could go back in time. I've mentioned this before. If I had a time machine, I wouldn't go back and kill Hitler or do anything that would help humanity. I would pick out pop culture. This could be a TV show. If any network TV or streaming platforms are listening, I would just go back in different pop culture inflections and visit them and see reactions of people. I wish I could go back in time and sit in a theater and watch little kids' reactions when Optimus turns his head and goes gray. I just want to see the tears flowing from the children as their parents try to console them and in their heads think, why is my child crying? because a cartoon robot just died.
Yeah, it's and
And
the
then
fun.
you're stuck with Judd Nelson as your new dad. It's like if your mom remarried and then she's going through her phase of bringing in new guys, and Judd Nelson shows up in a members only jacket and a cigarette and says, "Hey, I might be your new dad."
He shows up as his Breakfast Club character.
And no offense, I listen. I like Judd Nelson. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but Judd Nelson, you are no Optimus Prime, sir. Hot Rod,
Yeah.
you are no Optimus Prime.
But here's the thing. I've become a hot rod apologist over the decades.
I have a friend of mine who hates Hot Rod. Will take any chance he gets. He will espouse to you how Hot Rod was actually behind Optimus Prime's death and was in on it just so he could grab power. I will say, as a kid, I was sad that Optimus was gone. I thought Hot Rod looked cool. And over the years, as I've bought Transformers movie on VHS, on DVD, and now on Blu-ray, I still think Hot Rod is a cool character. He just unfortunately has to follow in the footsteps of Optimus Prime, and that's not many people can do that.
Yeah, it when it originally came out. So like I see the movie, and then all the people that I cared about die, and they introduce these new people, and
Not Bumblebee.
I was never a Bumblebee girl. I'm just like, no,
Oh,
no,
goodness! Now go on.
no. Cliff Jumper. I love Cliff Jumper because he was just an angry little asshole, and I could sympathize with that. And he was like, "I'm gonna shoot Megatron in his turbocharger." I'm like, "Yes, yes, take the fight to him. Do it, Cliff Jumper." Who was voiced by Casey Kasem, the voice of
Yes,
Shaq, also the voice of Teletran One, until they really pissed him off and he quit the show entirely.
and the voice of Robin.
Yeah, that's right. Just
Yes.
it's so weird because you hear, well, you and I growing up, we heard Casey Kasem doing the top 40 across the nation for
Mm.
decades, and then to find out that he did Shaggy and all your favorite Transformers and the computer was just like, what?
And was even in Battle of the Planets.
Yeah, it's just the 70s and 80s was a prolific time for voice actors because everyone was like super young and just getting into it. But so back to Hot Rod, I really loved his evolution, and I was obviously back in the when it was happening. We're like, okay, where's Optimus? When is Optimus coming back? And literally the next week after I saw the movie, the TV shows are saying, "Come see the return of Optimus Prime." I'm like, what? What?
Wait a minute.
Yeah, and it was a teaser episode. I don't know if you've seen the episode called Dark Awakening. They go to the Autobot mausoleum in space.
Yes.
Oh, oh, Mike, I wanted to walk those Howard halls for decades just to see the the corpses of my heroes.
And
Like,
again, remember, this is a cartoon for children.
yeah, yeah, air quotes for children.
So this
And
was your first this was you as a child learning about emotional manipulation, basically.
yeah, because I'm just like, oh, I'm reeling from the loss of Prime, trying to get used to the new guy. It's like, okay, yeah, okay, we got it. I love his alt mode, although I think a lot of people didn't like the hot rod camper thing.
Oh God,
But I'm
yeah, I
like,
remember that.
you know, and I'm just like, okay, we're down for it. And then they start teasing Prime coming back. I'm just like, well, okay, cool. And kind of to bring GI Joe into it, there was such a backlash to Prime getting killed that they changed the GI Joe the movie. Duke was supposed to die at the end.
Yes.
He was supposed to get those two serpents from Serpentor, cool name,
Hmm.
right in the chest, and he was supposed to die like right there, because they're like, well, it worked for Transformers, let's do it here. But the backlash was so strong, so many parents wrote in and chewed them out. They're like, let's just fix that in post, and they ADR'd a line of Doc saying, "Hey everybody, Duke's gonna pull through." And when I watch it, I'm like, Well, that seems weird. And
Well,
then
the GI Joe movie. I will say this: the GI Joe movie is like an extended episode of GI Joe, whereas Transformers the movie, the animation is so much better. You have that amazingly cheesy '80s soundtrack, which is just chef's kiss.
oh yeah,
And you got big voice actors. I mean, hell, it's Orson Welles' last credited role as Unicron
yep,
in a Transformers movie.
yeah.
Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, look up Orson Welles wrote a letter to a friend shortly after recording his lines for Unicron, and he's like, "Yes, yes, I voice a planet. I eat things, evidently," and it's just it's kind of like reading letters from Alec Guinness, kind of
talking
shyly
about
talking about
yeah,
Star Wars.
talking about Star Wars,
Yeah,
yes.
it's
And
like, well, I hope it works
little did these two decorated actors, and Orson Welles' case, director and producer, know that they would live on in children's memories all these years later. But for, again, dorks like me, I would then go and discover, oh, Alec Guinness was in this movie. Oh, Orson Welles did Citizen Kane. Oh my God. And
I know
I learned all these things from Star Wars and Transformers.
the same voice that said Rosebud is the same voice that says, "I find your posturing to be highly dubious."
And Unicron, I'll tell you, Unicron used to scare the living hell out of me as a kid. Just a planet eater.
Oh, he was so cool. Just
And his design was very cool. His design
yeah,
was very, very cool.
yeah. It
The
just
whole
Orson Welles delivered the crap out of those lines. Just like
Oh, even Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy is he's not taking a vacation.
no, no. He brought it 110%. He just like, "Hi, I'm evil now," or like, I'm even more evil, and here's my evil crown, and I'm purple, and I got giant boots, and I turn into a plasma cannon. And it's like, in I swear, every '80s kid has told their friend, you know, this is bad comedy, at least once.
That is a great line. I wish I could. I need to use that now that you've put that into my head. I need to use that with my children. They need to like not clean their room or something, and I'll just look at them and say, "This is bad comedy." I can't do a good Leonard Nimoy
Oh yeah,
impersonation.
I say, I find your posturing to be highly dubious to my kid all the time.
And of course, without the Transformers movie, Dirk Diggler would not have had anything to sing in the
No,
later parts of
it,
Boogie
it,
Nights.
it's such it's like if you distilled the '80s down to just its rawest form. So like if you were make a diamond of it, it encapsulates everything about that decade. Just the pomp, the circumstance, the yeah kind of feel to it.
Yes, yes.
Because I had the opportunity to see the guy who made the soundtrack, Vince DiCola, live, doing songs from the soundtrack at the party premiere for Unicron. They premiered it at a little bar down at San Diego Comic Con, I think 2019, 2018. And just to hear Vince DiCola like play those songs again, he's on the keyboard and he's doing the ditty from The Death of Optimus, and I'm just like, oh, and the fantastic thing there, Mike Berger, the voice of Grimlock, was there, and he's standing next to me, so I'm just like, I'm drinking, he's definitely drinking. And I'm just like, I go, "Holy shit, you're so and so." Goes, "Yep." He's like, "I love you. You're awesome." He's like, "Thanks. You're awesome too." And I'm like, "Oh, we're drinking and we're watching this." Like, yeah, like just, one of those things like just, oh man, if I could bring younger me here, well, he couldn't go in because it's a bar, but I would tell younger me when I got out, that was fantastic. You're going to enjoy this in more
I
and more
thought
years.
I thought you were going to tell me that you could tell he was drinking because he turned to you and said, "Me Grimlock, thank you," or something like
No, uh, when you see someone who's had too many, you know that they've had too
Sure.
many.
I
But
know.
he was
It's
still
most people
super
standing
friendly.
next to me on a Saturday night.
He just had that
Now,
wobble to him.
I think you are very correct in that this soundtrack is, if it's one of those things, if you distill the 80s down into its pure essence, this soundtrack would be one of the items that you would put into it. But why did Vince DiCola and the saxophone guy from the Lost Boys not make a supergroup together? Now that would have been almost 80s 80s overload if that would have happened.
That's funny. Yeah, that would have been too much, because that saxophonist, he just had such raw chemistry coming off of him. To add to it would be, it'd make TNT, and just things would explode and be bad. So, and also it was the '80s. We didn't know what we had until at least '94.
No, that's true. That is very true. I will say, when I worked at Suncoast Video, one of the first things we could make special orders, and it was still back in the day. Of course, I was working in the Suncoast, so there were still record stores out, and you could not find the Transformers soundtrack was out of print, and I did not have it. So one of the first things that I did when I worked at Suncoast, I special ordered the Transformers soundtrack on CD. That was one of the first things I did when I was hired by Suncoast, because I could now special order the Transformers soundtrack and get it at a little bit of a discount. So, and I think after the movie came out, as you just said, we didn't know how good we had it. There was a time there after the movie came out that people liked that soundtrack ironically, or made fun of that soundtrack. I think now, after all these years, I brought up Boogie Nights. They have Dirk Diggler is singing it at one point. I think after all these years, people now unironically see that, much like you said, it is just pure 80s bliss. Is it cheesy? Yes. Who cares? I put it in, I listen to those songs, and I am instantly transported back to watching the movie or watching the cartoon, and I am happy. I am in a happy place, and that's all you can ask for.
Oh yeah, agreed. And having, oh man, just the time and distance since then. So many amazing things have come out. They've released on vinyl, because I have the soundtrack, of course, and they released uh, specialized audio snippets from the TV show on vinyl, and I'm a vinyl nut, as you'll find out. And so, if it release something on vinyl, I will pick it up. And so, just you're just kind of spoiled for choice nowadays, and it's just been really, really amazing. Because we have adult money now, and so they're like, well, we would like adult money, and so they give us things, and we give them our money.
Yeah, I have adult money, but I also have an adult wife who will look at our adult credit card statement and say, "Why was this money spent on this?" And I'm like, because I needed it." And she'll say, "Yes, but we also need to pay our electric bill." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I mean, what's more important? Come on, to get our priorities straight."
Well, fish, and you feed a man for a day. Teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. So, if you get a toy, that's a toy for a lifetime. Whereas you just pay the bill's gone.
So, when did you know that you were a collector of Transformers? Now, is it just toys, or you're saying you have the album? Do you just collect the toys, or is it just anything Transformers you can get your hands on?
When I really it was about 20 years ago when I really started to get into serious collecting, because I just kind of because that's when the internet started. They really, and when things started to become known to the wider collecting circle. So I was like, oh, they made this? Whoa. And it was, a lot of it was just buying back my lost childhood. Like, oh man, I had that guy, but he broke. Well, I got a new one, because it's an original, but he's not broken. So you kind of go from there. And then I was like, oh, they came from original Japanese toys. I wonder what they look. Oh, there's one. And now I own it. And so for man, 6 years there, I was just hunting down early pre-Transformers Transformers. So like, uh, I have like Soundwave and from Japan, and I have his tapes from Japan, and Starscream from France. It's like the micro chains or something in French. It was they released in Canada, and so I've just like spent years finding them before they became the popular characters that we all love. Because I just is kind of blows my mind that they all existed before the company you know breathed life to them and they became the juggernaut they did. So I got they're all around my office and I just kind of look at them going, man, like this thing lasted decades before I found it. And it's just, that connection to that time back. A lot of what I collect is just like a time machine I can hold in my hands.
Yeah, eBay. I'm sure the people who created eBay are glad that most people of our age have been trying to buy back our childhood for the last 20 to 25 years. And I think that's what it is. And you kind of said it, but I don't go on eBay as much as I used to, but most of the time it is because I'll have something will spark a memory and I'll automatically think, oh, can I find that on eBay? Because it's like trying to cobble a ladder back in time to that childhood when things were simpler and all you really cared about was playing with your toys or reading your comic books or watching a certain cartoon. Um, and that I think it goes back to what I was talking about when we first started, where I don't think my kids have any kind of, and it might just be my kids. I don't want to make a grand statement and make a sweeping statement and say it's all kids of this current generation. But I know with my kids, and it's not because my wife and I didn't want to buy them certain toys. It's just that they never had any kind of close personal connection to any certain toy line. I think that leads me into, have you passed down your fandom?
Yeah. So, it's kids are these amazing sponges. And when my kid was old enough to really start understanding the moving picture, I sat him down, the little blob, and we just went through everything I loved. And it kind of like, you just kind of like sit back and watch. Because I didn't want to be the kind of parent that said, here, you have to love this too, because I loved it. Because, that's not.
I only did that with Star Wars and with my Philadelphia sports teams. I mean, I just told them, if you don't like this, then I'll disown you and leave you on the doorstep of somebody else. But I mean, everything else they were fine liking. I just had to make sure. No, I was the same way with my kids, where I didn't tell them they had to, but you kind of nudged them a little bit by starting them young. So
Yeah, and he watched it. He's like, "Oh, this is fun," and we watched together. And then, he's 14 now, and so he kind of got older, and like he just didn't seem to gel with it. And I'm like, okay, hey, that's cool. Well, we'll find other hobbies that we can share together. But these last couple years, he's just I will come. He's watching TV in the living room, and I come out, and he's watching episodes of the original show, and just like he'll watch movie reviews of the original movie, and then he'll go to watch the movie, and I'm just like it just you know makes me feel so good that
yeah, it's a proud parent moment.
yeah.
I've felt that too, where you see your kid without prompting from you or without tying them to a chair and saying, "Watch this" or "Read this." They're discovering that stuff on their own, and that little nugget of interest that they had most likely came from you. So you just sit back and say, "Okay, I did something right." I They can't pass math. I can't help them with their math homework, but you know what? They like Transformers. They like Star Wars.
Yeah, my kid's in calculus, so I'm definitely
Oh
I
God, my hands are starting to shake just imagining that.
yeah, I dropped out years ago. I was like, okay, I made it to pre-algebra, and they said I don't have to do anymore. I said, okay, good. I don't have to do anymore.
Oh God. So, were you, and I forget because I mean, we, on our last episode, I didn't know if we talked about this, but were you a comic book person growing up?
No, I really wasn't. We didn't really have a comic store outlet in McMinnville, and so I didn't see any of the comics until I was much older. And he heard about them because there was the American comics, and then there was the English comics or the UK comics, and
Mm.
those got weird. And they brought in Spider-Man to kind of bump up the sales, and that's why he's on the cover of the third issue. And it was only supposed to be like an 81 run issue, but it proved popular enough that it went for like two something. And on the last issue of the American comics, it says part 200 something of an 81 run issue.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, the comic I have, and I have it sitting in front of me right now, is Transformers #3. It's dated January, 75 cents from Marvel, and it says 3 in a 4-issue limited series. It proved so popular that they kept up the joke. And as you said at the very end, it said number whatever it was of a 200 and whatever
Yeah,
limited
yeah,
series.
the four-part series, yeah.
And when you had, and this was months ago, when after we recorded our first episode, and I said to you, and whenever you want to come back on, tell me what you want to talk about. And you had messaged me and said, I want to talk about Transformers. I really want to do Transformers. And the first thing when you said Transformers, not the cartoon, not the movie, not the toys that popped into my head, was the comic that I'm holding in my hand right now. Now, I would love to say that it's the original comic. It is not. I ordered this online for probably like $3 or $4. It's previously owned. It's not in bad condition, but this comic. I've told this story before. Where I grew up in Philadelphia, in Southwest Philadelphia, I grew up around most of my Italian relatives. And if you have Italian relatives or know Italians, they like to live near each other. So I had relatives 2 doors away, right up the street, across the street, 2 blocks away from me. I had a cousin who lived a couple blocks away from me, and he was around my age, and he was into comics. He wasn't as into comics as I was, but you would go to his house, and he and my brother, because they were a little bit closer in age, my younger brother, they would play video games, and I would look for the comics that he would have sitting around. And one day I found this comic, and Spider-Man is one of my favorite characters, and also Spider-Man in the black outfit. Now, when this came out, Spider-Man had just gotten the black outfit from Secret Wars. So I was most likely 11 or 12 years old, seeing Transformers, Spider-Man in his black outfit. I had to read that comic. And that comic has stayed with me. I didn't start collecting Transformers comics after that, but I always remember that comic. So when you said, "I want to talk about Transformers," that was the first thing that popped into my head. And before this episode, uh, I knew that I was going to be talking to a major Transformers fan, so I didn't have to do too much research into the Transformers. But one of the only items of research that I used was buying this comic online and reading it beforehand. So that's a long preamble to say you weren't into comics, but did you collect or read the Transformers comics at the time, or did you wait until later, or
Actually, the only Transformer comic I possess is the number one with Optimus on the cover and that black Spider-Man in the bottom left-hand corner. And that I didn't read it because like when it showed up sealed, I'm like, I bought it slabbed because it's like,
really?
yeah, well, it needs to stay that way
Mhm.
because like whenever I get an item, it stays in that condition until my death, and then well, whoever gets it after me, it's up to them. And
Well, if I have you on a lot more podcasts, can I worm my way into your will and you could send me some of the slabbed comics that you have so I can pay for my child's college?
consider it done, Mike. Whatever crap you want, it's yours, buddy. But yeah, I just like I was saying, I never saw the comics until I was older, and so they just were never in my hemisphere of things I was into, and just and then as I got older and started getting into collecting, finding out the weird, bizarre things, because like I was saying, the American comics stopped at a certain point, but evidently the British loved their Transformer comics because it continued for years after the American series was over, and they did some weird stuff. Like, uh, you ever see the one of Ratchet and Megatron got fused in an accident, and so there's just this nightmarish hellscape on the cover of them saying "Help me," and I'm sure you've seen that famous one of Shockwave that says Transformers the banner at the top, and he is scrawled using his laser says "Are all dead."
I was just getting ready to bring that up. That's most likely if the Spider-Man one isn't the most famous, then that one is the most famous cover. I know that cover without even reading that comic. I know the cover.
Yeah, and it's just amazing what sticks in pop culture oeuvre of just that cover because it's so it's it did borrow a phrase from our earlier days. It was very metal. It's just like,
Yes.
oh, you just the fingers come up and you're like, oh, that's metal, because he's just, he's scrawling in the wall and he's looking at the viewer and he's saying Transformers are all dead. And I think that was it might have fallen in the middle of the introduction of the Dinobots, but that's why he's on Earth, is to find them. And so it's just like, it's just cool.
Yeah, reading this comic, they wanted to, because they had the license for it, they wanted to bring the Transformers into the Marvel universe. After reading it, it's kind of Spider-Man doesn't really fit in. I can't see them having more adventures with more Marvel kind of superheroes. It's almost fitting a square peg into a round hole. I think Transformers needed their own kind of universe separate from the Marvel universe. And I'm glad I didn't read the comic, but I don't think they had too many. A couple other characters guest starred over the years. Even in this one, you see Nick Fury shows up. I'm sure they wanted to whenever they needed maybe a sales boost or anything like that, they would bring in a character. But it was fun to read this, especially because I'm a fan of this era of Spider-Man, so that brought me back. But if I was a fan of Transformers, I wouldn't want them crossing over into the larger Marvel universe. And Transformers has had a history now because other companies have owned the license for Transformers comics. I'm sure I think Dark Horse had it for a while, and other comic companies have had it. And Transformers had a long history of having long comic runs. And you're bringing up that the cover that we were just talking about. I think it goes into again something that we mentioned, in that ostensibly this was a cartoon and a product for kids, but there was always that little bit of an edge where it was a little bit more adult or a little bit more edgy, and not that edgy, but even the cartoon, where we didn't even bring it up, but when when is it Sparkplug or who says shit in the middle of the cartoon when Unicron is getting ready?
I have a
And
really funny story about that. So like
that
when
was such a big thing.
it was when it came out on DVD, I don't remember the year, but it was like first time out on DVD. So it was like it wasn't, they didn't put a lot of money into it, obviously, but in the menu, it just said the curse word. So like if you wanted it, and that's what I'll always remember that, because when I popped it in, I'm like, oh man, I haven't seen this movie in years, because I never had the tape, and so I just like, let's just watch it, and I like at the menu, and just looking at the different sections of the film you can go to in a menu, and it just said the curse word. I'm like, no, you couldn't really, and so I clicked on it, and they started right there a few seconds before Spark plug. No, sorry, Spike.
It is Spike. I'm sorry. Yeah, I said Sparkplug, but you're right. It's Spike.
Yeah, and his son Daniel, and Spike just goes, "Oh shit, what are you gonna do now?" And like, who hasn't said that to themselves a million times?
And that, we joked about, or I even brought up the legacy of people remembering the songs from it and people just remembering the movie itself. But for a long time after that, it was, oh, remember that was the movie they cursed in it. They cursed in the Transformers movie. That was what you would bring up to friends. Oh yeah, they cursed in the Transformers movie. It was such a big thing for us kids back then because I'd never seen a cartoon. Now, again, kids now, my son can sit upstairs and he's like, "Oh, I'm watching anime," or "Oh, I'm watching Invincible," and now the adult, and I'm saying it with air quotes, the adult cartoon or the mature cartoon is something that every kid can be exposed to. But in 1986, to hear them curse in a Transformers movie, it blew my 11-year-old mind.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's why the deaths were so
Yes.
traumatic, because it was brutal and it was darker than the show ever got. Like, they shot Braun. Like, not only did first of all, they shot Braun, and not only did they shoot him, it was in this beautiful hyper colored 3D image of him being shot through the shoulder by Megatron, wielded by Starscream, with
Yep.
with a song called "Instruments of Destruction." You
Hmm.
know, you just that guitar go wow wow, and they just break into the shuttle and just start you know murdering everyone.
I think I'm gonna have to have you back, and we're gonna have to have a special episode where we cover Transformers the movie as a single episode, because I want to get your insight into the movie.
Oh yeah, I would love to do that, because there's like in the years since, I found out so many weird and interesting things. Oh, that the thing that sparked my memory when I'm talking about it. The original cars were from the Diaclone line, and so Ultra Magnus, he was supposed to be like this new toy commander, and he was based on an original Diaclone toy that was colored differently. And in a few of the movie promos, he was his Diaclone colors. So instead of the blue and white like we all know him to be, he was actually red and black.
Ah, okay.
And it just little stuff like that, like, because animation's hard, and so
Yeah.
we're trying to be as cheap as they can be, but still go as far as they could. And so it's just little stuff like that. And of course, the introduction of the first female Autobot, RC, who,
Yes.
as a little kid, just blew my brain. Like, oh man, female Transformers. And of course she was pink, because
Of course.
it's
Of
still
course. Yes. You
it's still the
have to make
sexist.
it so have to make it simple for the kids.
Yeah, and just it was just and Cup was great. I love Cup.
I like Cup too. You
Yeah,
have to you have to have the crusty old timer, and
yeah,
now as I
yeah.
as I ease into my crusty old timer phase of life, I have a lot more respect for Cup, even more than I did back then. But Cup was a fun character.
Yeah. Well, like when the Autobots are needling him in the shuttle for war stories, and he just goes, "You're living one now."
Yeah. Well, we brought it up, or I had brought it up about the continuity that I enjoyed with the Transformers, and after the movie, and you had said this, the cartoon carried on the continuity of the movie in that it kept the new characters, but by that time they were feeling the backlash of killing off a lot of the characters, Optimus Prime number one, so they knew they had to bring them back in some way, which they eventually did, correct? Didn't they have a storyline with the ghosts of Starscream and some of the other
Yeah.
characters that were killed off?
Yeah. So okay, well, it's quite the tale. So I'll kind of start and encompass as much as I can. So Chris Latta had a drinking problem. The actor played Starscream.
Okay.
So the production office kind of got tired of having to bail him out, like literally pay his fines to get out of jail. And so to kind of fix it, they killed off Starscream.
Wow.
And then that's why he died in the movie, because they were like, we just this it's a he's a problematic actor, we're not getting the production out of him that we need, we're already clearing the slate, let's just do it and be done with him. And then in season 3 or 4, they have kind of like a last hurrah called Starscream's Ghost, which whenever I played the video game Rock Band, I was named my band Starscream's Ghost. Because if that's not a punk rock name, I don't know what is.
Seriously.
And so they brought him back for one last episode where they found out that some Cybertronians have a spark or a soul, and Starscream becomes a ghost, and Unicron, trying to have Starscream rebuild his body, rebuild Starscream, and then he just takes off at the end of the episode. And of course, they never brought Chris Latta back. So it's just this weird ghost story.
And that's heady for a syndicated cartoon that's for 8 to 12-year-olds
Yeah, yeah, and
and is meant to sell toys.
well, that's the other thing. It's like the suits are like just well, let's this it's bringing in this amount of money. We make this change, it brings in this amount of money, and but the creatives like Larry Hama or and the other writers like, well, no, let's tell these engaging stories that I can do with these characters. A few years ago, I got the opportunity to speak with the voice actor for Shipwreck from GI Joe, and I had to talk to him about the episode called Mara, and it's called like Welcome to something. It was like those take on the town of like Springville, Welcome to Springville, where Shipwreck is. You don't know it till the end of the episode, but he's abducted by Cobra and brainwashed, and he's like living this dream because they're trying to pump him for information in the real world. Meanwhile, he's dreaming this idyllic 1950s life with his wife Mara, who at the end of the episode dissolves
Hmm.
because he's waking from the dream, and it just like who does that to children? And then Shipwreck wakes up and realizes that Cobra has been manipulating him, and it's just like that's just normal Saturday morning kids cartoon show about like your family being fake and a false identity, and it's just like but yet it's a kid show.
Well, now talking about all this, I want to go back and rewatch all of Transformers and G.I. Joe because I've long thought you look on, we brought up eBay and also with YouTube when Generation X, like me and like you, started logging on and getting onto YouTube. When it was me, I was like, okay, let me see if I can find some of the cartoons I grew up with. And I would see a couple Transformers and G.I. Joes here and there. And much like I said, the animation always got to me. I mean, there were points where you could tell that they were cutting corners or it was cheaper, but it
Mhm.
still stood out amongst most of the syndicated or Saturday morning fare that we got. With some of the episodes, some are by the numbers and it's good versus evil, and we have to go get this, do Hickey, or save this person. But there were certain storylines or certain episodes that did deal with something like you just brought up with the shipwreck episode or those Transformers episodes that I still remember where it made me feel uncomfortable seeing the ghosts of Transformers that I had seen brutally murdered on the movie screen now trying to find peace in some kind of robotic afterlife that I could only dimly imagine.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm a 12-year-old. I don't know what existential dread is, but I'm feeling it right now.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I like that episode, Dark Awakenings, where they visit the mausoleum, because it's like and they have the heroes standing there, and so you get to see your guys that you miss one last time, and then that's when Hot Rod discovers Optimus has been activated and is trying to build a ship, and then you find out, I think it was in the second part or later that first part, where he'd been revived by the Quintessons to act as a double agent, and so he's asking for the Matrix back, but at the same time the original Optimus is fighting that new Quintesson programming, and I love the inclusion of the Quintessons just because they're the freaky. They're just freaky. They're more alien than robots that can turn into vehicles, and just their lines is either guilty or innocent was just
Yeah.
it just you just hear it in your head just like guilty.
Oh,
You know.
I can see them in my head. Yep. I mean, it's a great visual. It's a great everything. The voice, the visual. It's again very unique, and it's not just something thrown. It before I said it, I thought better of it. Yeah, sure, it is to sell a toy. That's what all this is when it comes down to it. But it's not just something where they said, okay, put anything out there. Be it the powers that be or the animators or the writers who were writing the characters, someone or some group actually put thought and creativity into what they were putting on the screens. And I think you could tell that, even like you brought up with the movie. they got into it. I mean, they wanted to introduce new toys, but they said if we're gonna go out, we're gonna go out with a bang. It stuck with our generation. I think for a lot of people, it was the first, and I don't think I'm overstating this. It's their first acknowledgement of death when you're seeing characters that you feel that strongly about die and they don't come back at the end. It's not that fake death where oh it was all a dream or oh we can bring them all back. That movie ended and Optimus Prime is gone.
Mhm.
And if you didn't see that episode 2 weeks later, like you didn't know that they were going to bring him back at least for a little bit on the TV show. And you also didn't know in 1986, 87 that Transformers would be around for another 40 years and there would be different variations and different cartoon shows and different comics and live action movies. So if you saw Optimus Prime turn his head and turn gray, that was it. If you're a 9-year-old sitting there, that's got to hit you in a way that you weren't expecting when you walked into that movie theater and sat down with your popcorn.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wasn't expecting the Care Bears movie, which was also really good, but it just you remember that moment. I'm not saying it's like where you were when Kennedy was shot, but
Yeah, for some
for
of us, maybe.
for a little kid, like you remember when you saw Optimus Prime, the guy you spent the last 4 years playing with his toy, die.
We're bringing up, and I just said, that Transformers would, uh, after the movie, they continued with the TV show for a little bit, but as with everything, the popularity of the toys and the cartoons started to wane. But over the last 40 plus years, we have seen different incarnations of the Transformers, be it new cartoon series, be it new comic books, be it live action movies. Now, I want to bring up before we get out of here, what are your thoughts on the Michael Bay and beyond live action Transformers movies?
The first one I really enjoyed. It's before Shia LaBeouf got too Shia LaBeoufy, got weird, but I
I
really
know exactly what you're talking about.
because my first complaint is that there's just too many humans. Like I'm like if I want to see a movie with humans, I will go watch every other film. But that scene of the raid on the Air Force base from I can't remember the Decepticon's name, but when he lands and it got super tense in the theater, and we were all just kind of watching it, and then suddenly you see that phase of the hologram in the cockpit, and then he starts transforming, and then just lays waste to that Air Force base, trying to get the info of the goggles or the glasses that Sam had, is just holy crap. That's what do you go to a theater to see a live action Transformers for? That scene right there. And I enjoyed some of the lighter hearted moments that I thought they were really funny. Uh, it got with Michael Bay, everything is like, oh, that's great, but then he just keeps piling it on, and I'm like, okay, this souffle now tastes bad. Please stop. And so he went too crazy going for it. I only saw the first three in the theater, maybe the first two, and then kind of like once they introduced Autobot Heaven with their version of the Matrix that Sam got a hold of and was therefore able to go to Autobot Heaven to talk with Prime, and that whole thing with their version of Jetfire, that old SR-71 Blackbird that came to life that talked like an old British guy that farted, and his fart was the parachute coming out. And it was just it's I just watched that and I said, "Oh man, I'm done." And I just never went back. I watched the first one on occasion because it's I felt it was a really good distillation of the fun stuff from Transformers, and just everything after that was just kind of Michael Bay trying to have his cake and eat it too.
It's making me happy that I saw the first one in the theaters also, and I thought it was okay. I thought it was okay. I saw it once. I never saw it again and never felt the need to see any of the other ones. The special effects looked cool. As you said, Michael Bay just gets too like Shia LaBeouf gets too Shia LaBeoufy. Michael Bay gets too Michael Bay-y, and it just looked like Transformer porn in that he was more interested in how the Transformers transformed and seeing all the little gears
Yeah,
and
but
and
later ones,
mechanical thingamabobbers moving
yeah,
and shifting, and I I don't think that that's what fans this of all of this ever cared about. It was, and it brings it back to the story that you heard from Peter Cullen talking to his brother. It brings it back to what Optimus Prime and all of those characters meant to us. We didn't really care about how that truck transformed into a robot. We cared that that truck that did transform into that robot was a hero and was teaching us about heroism and was a leader and was somebody we could look up to. And I think that's what Michael Bay never really grasped. Now, I did hear some of the later movies, specifically the Bumblebee movie, was more liked by some of the fans. And I think the last movie they made was it CGI, where it was kind of an origin story of Optimus Prime and Megatron becoming friends.
yeah. So you got the first five, which is Michael Bay all the way. Then by five, which wasn't originally a Transformer script. It was supposed to be a Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and they just kind of slapped Transformers on it.
Of course.
After that didn't perform well. They said, "Well,
Shocker.
who's surprised there?" Uh, they're kind of done with it, and so then the I can't remember the guy who directed Bumblebee. He wanted to do a Bumblebee, and they're like, "Well, Bay's out, so go be my guest." And the first 2.5 minutes of Bumblebee's a really good movie. It didn't get the praise that it should have, because they treated the Transformers better than Bay did, and it shows the Autobots escape from Cybertron, and it's everything that you wanted to see in that first Transformers film. Because it's the pose where Prime lands on Autobot City on Earth and is laying waste to the Decepticons in that trench. It's that he does that jump, that iconic Prime jump where he just jumps with his front leg pushing forward, and he just taking his ion cannon and he's going dum 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 dum, and then he lands and he stands up and he's got the front the grip and just a dum 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 dum, get them out of here now, dum 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 dum. And we kind of like to see the roster of all our guys like Wheeljack and RC and Brawn, and they look like they did in the TV show but modernized, and that was so amazing. And then Bumblebee does his Bumblebee thing, because they made him more like a teenager than he was in the original TV show. And so he's like, I'm here, Optimus. Let's kick Decepticon butt. And he's like, no, Bumblebee, you gotta go. We gotta start the movie. Go. So he throws him in a pod, and you see Bumblebee escape Earth, and it's just amazing, because you got in the original Transformers, when the jets transformed into their alt mode, they're called Tetra jets, and so you got to see what they would look like if they were actually real. And it was just like, oh man, just I'm in. And just from then on, the rest of Bumblebee was really good. And then I didn't see the sequel, which was a Rise of the Beasts. Because did you ever watch Beast Wars, Mike, growing up?
No, I think that was by the time you hit that certain age where you tell yourself that you're too cool for cartoons. Oh, I don't watch cartoons anymore, not knowing that 10 years later you'll be watching cartoons again, and then 10 years after that looking online to find the cartoons that you said that didn't want to watch anymore. I can remember being aware of Beast Wars, but I didn't watch it.
Oh yeah. Hey, you might be surprised to know I watched Beast Wars. I was one of those slightly older kids who probably should have been out having fun with his friends, but I was too busy watching Transformers. Watching Beast Wars, and it was really good because it takes place in the far-flung future. The war has been settled. the Autobots have won, and but there's a rogue new Decepticon, and he calls himself Megatron, and he carries these things called the Golden Discs. And then later in the show, you find out the Golden Discs are actually a message from G1 Megatron from the past, saying like, "Look, here are the coordinates to a." Spoiler for anyone who wants to watch this 30-year-old show. Uh, that there's a time, like a, not say bubble, it's more like there's a hole in space that will take you back to prehistoric Earth, and that's the Maximals, the new Autobots, chase down the new Megatron through. And so when you crash on this planet, they spend like 3 seasons on this primitive planet, going, "Oh man, this is really weird," and then you find out it's primitive Earth, and they come up in season 4. I have the box set. They come upon the Ark with all the dead Autobots and dead Decepticons, and then from the season 4 on, it's about protecting the Ark from the new Megatron who's trying to bend the time stream. And eventually, and in this one episode, amazing episode, I love it. He shoots sleeping Optimus, and it starts ripping apart the time stream because he's murdered the original Optimus millions of years before they awake.
I think once again, it goes back to what we were talking about is in all of these incarnations, I think they had a really good grasp on the history that came before it, and they had a good grasp on continuity. And if you were joking around about spoilers for a 30-year-old show, but if people wanted to go back and watch this, I think people like me, that does make me interested because I am in it. It's not just as I keep saying, just a show where it's one episode is this and it's done, and then the next episode it's like nothing happened and everything is new again. I would crave a show that has continuity and references its past and brings up ideas like, okay, we're in the past, but what happens if I kill this version in the past? And would that rip time apart? And
Mhm.
I think Transformers for being a cartoon and being an IP that was there because it was toys and it's there to push merchandise, especially onto kids, always had a little bit of a higher ceiling and always was at least was punching above its weight, let's say, or you know what I mean, where it just wasn't a simple cartoon, it just wasn't a simple toy. It was something that I think you could enjoy as disposable entertainment, but you could also enjoy as a fan of the lore that the show was setting up.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of a quote from the oh man, the guy who did Batman the animated series.
Paul Dini or
No, Tim
Bruce Timm.
Bruce Timm, yeah, who's basically said like, Warner Brothers came to him and wanted a Batman show, but it's like they wanted it for kids, and he's like, well, I want to kind of shoot higher, and so like they were writing to 13 and 14-year-olds instead of the 9 to 12 that most execs feel as the air quotes prime time to get a kid's imagination and their parents' wallet. And
Mhm.
so you get stories that just shoot a little like above, and so you're like, oh whoa, kind of like the lines like I said about, there's a fine line between being a hero and being a memory. It's just little stuff like that, just little nuggets that you're just kind of like, huh, and then just stay with you. Even the fun quotable lines just change you immensely, even though you don't know it at the time.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of cut this conversation off right now, but I will say before we started recording, I joked about it, but I was worried because I'm not the biggest Transformers fan and I knew you were. So I was worried that I'm not going to have anything to bring to the conversation, but hearing your passion for Transformers kind of jarred my memories of how I felt about not only just the toys, but also the cartoon and also the movie. And um, yeah, I kind of got caught up in your obvious passion for this whole franchise. And as I said, I'd like to have you back on. I'd like to do an episode just specifically on the Transformers movie, and I'm sure that will lead to even more conversations about the cartoons and some of the products that came not only during the movie but after it. So I think that would be a fun conversation to have in the future.
Yep, I would love to come back anytime.
You know that the invitation is always out there. But until you do come back, I want to say thank you for coming on this episode. And do you want to give any of your information out there if anybody wants to to seek you out on the internet, or do you want to stay relatively anonymous?
I think this time I'll remain anonymous. I'll just be that voice in your ears that you hear every once in a while. But
I kind of don't blame you. I mean, come on. But for me, since I'm doing a podcast, I find it funny to find so many people that say they are introverts but also have podcasts. But I find it funny because for as much as I like to hear myself talk, obviously because I have two podcasts, I find I I'm kind of an introvert too. So it's that dichotomy of being an introvert and not wanting to go out. Maybe it's just because I don't like people, but it's easier to talk to them about our shared subjects that we like. But I do have to tell people where I am on the internet so they can find the show. I will say before I give out any of the information, season two, I keep calling it season two of the podcast. These last 9 or 10 episodes that I've done, I've seen the audience grow for the podcast. So I want to really thank everybody out there that is not only listening, but also sharing the show on Twitter, on Facebook, and just getting the word out there. And I just want to ask everybody who does listen if they could share the show on Twitter and Facebook, if they could give a 5-star review, a 4-star review, hell, give a 1-star review on Apple, but leave a review on there because it helps with the algorithm. And just share the show with your friends, with anybody you know who is into this kind of stuff. I would greatly appreciate it, and I do greatly appreciate it because, like I said, I have seen the listener numbers grow over the second season of the show, and I'm really appreciative of that. We are on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we are on all the other podcast platforms that I don't even know about because I don't listen to those platforms, but we're on them. So if you're looking for us, we are there under Pop Culture Basement. If you're looking for me on Twitter, because I don't call it the other thing because that's stupid, I am on Twitter at Pop Culture Basement. I'm also there under my my normal name, which is Mike Jamison, or This Lightsaber Kills Fascists. And you could also find me on Blue Sky under Pop Culture Basement, or This Lightsaber Kills Fascists. And we are also on Facebook because I'm old and I'm still on Facebook. So just look for Pop Culture Basement on Facebook if you want to check us out there. And I always say, if you want to drop me a direct message or a Facebook message or a message anywhere and just have an idea for a show or something you'd like to hear, if you'd like to come on the show, just let me know. Like I said, Melodi said, hey, I want to do a show about Transformers, and right now we're sitting here on a Saturday night and we're recording a episode about the Transformers. So if you're passionate about something, let me know and come on the show as a guest. But until then, Melodi, I want to say thank you again for not only suggesting this, but for coming on the show for a second time. And I am going to have you on soon again, hopefully.
oh yeah, I got plenty of things that I'm a fan of, so I'll be back.
Thank God, because I am always looking for content. So just write me up a list and I'll start trying to plan out my schedule now.
I can't do.
And like I said at the beginning of this episode, this will be released in early December. So we are in the holiday season, and I can't think of a better way to kick off the holiday season than talking about Transformers, talking about toys, talking about the toys that we remember growing up. So, Melody, I want to wish you happy holidays. I want to wish the listeners, I almost said the viewers. If you're viewing this, it's pretty amazing, but I want to wish the listeners out there happy holidays, and I just want to say, you know what? sit down tonight and try to remember what it was like to run down those steps and to see that bike sitting under the tree, to see that orange sled sitting under the tree. If you were lucky enough to see the G.I. Joe base sitting under the tree, or just to see any of those awesome, awesome toys that you grew up with sitting under the tree. And you know what? Sip your coffee, sip your tea, sip your adult beverage, and just smile and realize how amazing it was growing up. And until then, Melody, thank you. To all the listeners out there, thank you. And we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Night, everybody.